That's how I did it. I'm gonna try hard insanely much. Like part 382. Because my boy here doesn't lobby. He just keeps what?
From 2016 titled Monster Calls. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more movie recaps. 12-year-old Connor reaches over the edge of a cliff, clinging to his mother as she is about to fall into the abyss. He eventually loses his grip and lets her go. He abruptly wakes up from his nightmare. The next morning, he makes himself breakfast. His mom joins him and informs him that her cancer is progressing, but all will be okay, as they're going to try a new round of chemotherapy. Much to Connor's dismay, his mom informs him that his grandma will be able to take care of him. Afterwards, he meets him in the schoolyard while the bully's friends watch. While he's sleeping that night, his clock ticks over from 12:06 to 12:07. When this happens, he hears a voice booming from outside, calling out his name. The massive yew tree outside of his house shapeshifts until it turns into a giant tree monster. Connor casually shouts for him to go away, but the monster carries him out into the garden. The monster tells him that he expects him to. Connor is defiant towards him, but the monster promises he will visit again, and he will tell 3 stories. And when he's finished his 3 stories, Connor will tell him a 4th one, and it will be the truth. And that will be what he hides and is most afraid of. Connor then finds himself back in his room, which is covered in leaves, leading him to realize that what happened wasn't a dream. The next morning, his grandmother arrives. She finds him in the kitchen and is condescending towards him. He tells her to leave, as she isn't. He says that his mother always gets sick after the treatments and will be better in a day. His grandma tells him that she won't be better the next day even if she seems better. She says that they need to talk about him coming to live with her permanently. That night, his grandma sleeps in his bedroom and he sleeps calmly. The clock clicks from 12:06 to 12:07, but no monster comes. He then sees him outside the window. The monster tells him his first tale, told in beautiful animation. In a happy kingdom lived a king who lost all of his sons to battles with giants and dragons. His only remaining heir was a grandson who grew up to be a prince, who was loved by the kingdom. There were rumors that his new wife, replacing his first after she died of a broken heart, had poisoned him, but the king begged the kingdom not to blame her. Now queen, the woman wanted to keep her title by marrying her stepson, the prince, but instead he rides away with the farmer's daughter, whom he had fallen in love with. They slept under the branches of a yew tree, the same tree that has become the monster. But when the prince awoke, he found out that the woman had been murdered in the night. Men then approached to arrest him. As a last resort, he asked the yew tree for help and the monster came alive, scaring the village into rallying behind the prince as he claims the queen murdered his wife. The queen is attacked by a mob and the monster says that she is never seen again. Connor then asks if he can help do something about his grandma. The monster interjects that the story isn't done. The queen wasn't killed. The monster had carried her to a new village, far enough away that her people wouldn't find her. Connor asks why he would spare the life of a woman who murdered the farmer's daughter. The monster says he never said the queen killed the farmer's daughter, only that the prince had said it was so. He then reveals the prince had murdered his bride to frame the queen to turn the kingdom against her. The prince then continued to be loved by the king. Connor is irritated and complains that the lesson of the good prince being a murderer and the queen not being a monster. The monster says the queen might have been a witch and could have become evil, but he kept her safe because she was not a murderer and the king didn't die of poisoning, but of old age. There is no good guy in the story. Most people are innocent. Sometimes kingdoms can be and sometimes which is fair and safe. Connor asks how this is going to save him from his grandma, and the monster tells him it's not the grandma he needs saving from. The next day, in class, the bully stares down Connor and later, he beats him up outside. When he gets home, his grandma tells him his mother had to go back to the hospital and that the chemotherapy is not working. She tells him that his dad is coming. Connor sees his mom in her room, wearing a wig. She speaks gingerly about the topic of her health, telling him the last treatment didn't work as they expected it to, but they're going to try something else. Connor now stays with his grandma in her house. She tells him of her antique grandfather clock. It's been in her family for generations and she forbids him to touch it. She leaves him alone in the house, which is immaculate and tidy. Connor's dad visits and the Connor is excited about getting to leave his grandma's house, but his dad explains that he meant just for Christmas. Connor doesn't want to live in his grandma's house, pointing out it's an old lady's house where you can't touch anything or sit anywhere. He wants his own space and his own room. His dad points out that in America, they barely have enough room for the three of them and that Connor's school is in Europe. We know that Connor is bullied at school and he doesn't seem to mind the idea of leaving. Back at his grandma's house, the two find she has returned to the hospital. His dad tells him he's only there until Friday because Americans don't get much holiday. Connor tells him he's not American and asks why he really came. His dad tells him he came because his mother asked him to. Connor settles into his grandma's living room, now upset. The clock hands then stop at 12:07 and the monster is now in the living room, telling Connor that he is going to tell him the second tale. Again, we see it illustrated in puppet animation 150 years ago. The valley was filled with factories. An apothecary lived in the village, digging up herbs and barks and berries and leaves for his medicine. But when he tries to sell his goods to people in the village, they are rude to him because they prefer modern medicine. Where Connor's house and the tree are now, used to be a church with a parson inside. The parson had two daughters whom he loved very much. The apothecary wanted to use it because of its healing powers, but he would have to cut it down and the parson would refuse. The monster noticed that the parson was not unkind, but wanted to take the village out of the days of superstition and witchery. He preaches against the apothecary in church and the town is easily turned against him. But one day, the parson's daughters become very sick and no modern doctor is able to cure them. He approaches the apothecary and begs him to help his innocent daughters. The apothecary asks, "Why should I? You threw away my business with your preaching and refused to give me the tree which can help with my healing." The parson tells him he may have the tree and he will preach sermons in his favor if he will save his daughters. The apothecary asks, "You would give up everything you believe in?" The parson affirms this, saying to save his daughters, he'll give up everything. The apothecary says, "Then there is nothing I can do to help you." The very next day, both of the daughters died. And that night, the tree came alive and became monstrous. Connor thinks he is going to punish the apothecary, but he actually tears the parson's house apart. The monster points out that the apothecary was not the bad guy when times were easy. The parson nearly
Your best vacation is inside World of Tanks. Swimming pool with friends.
destroyed the apothecary, but when things were tough, he was willing to throw aside every belief to save his daughters. If the parson had given the tree to the apothecary when he first asked, he could have saved many lives, including the parson's daughters. Even though the apothecary was greedy and rude, he was still a healer. The parson was a man of belief who was willing to sacrifice it at the first challenge. He believed selfishly and fearfully. The monster then continues to destroy the parson's house in the story, knocking down the fireplace, throwing away their beds, smashing the furniture, breaking the windows. Connor helps out, smashing things. But when he returns back to Grandma's sitting room, he realizes it wasn't just a fantasy. The entire living room and everything in it has been smashed to pieces, including her clock. His grandma returns home. She takes in the scene with horror in her eyes. Connor is afraid he is going to be punished, but she is in such anguish she only lets out a scream, knocking over the last standing display cabinet. That night, Connor's grandma is heard in her bedroom, weeping. The next morning, he finds his father cooking eggs, telling him that his grandma had called him to tell him about the living room. She is rushed to the hospital and he will drive him to school. Connor complains that he wants to go to the hospital. His dad tells him he knows he's upset, hence the living room. Connor asks if he's going to be punished, but his dad says there's no point in punishing him. The next day at school, Connor is bullied again, but not assaulted. Connor goes to the hospital afterwards. He overhears his mom, sick and upset, but she covers it up when he enters the control room. She tells Connor that she had a bad reaction that morning, but they're going to try a new medicine to get some good results, and it's medicine that comes from a tree like the one in the backyard. She says all this time they could have just chopped it down to cure her, but not the one in their actual yard because it's almost like a friend. Connor and his dad go on.
The girl next
Yo.
door was since he was a child, who is currently dating Flash Thompson, and the other is his best friend Harry Osborn, the rich kid and son of scientist entrepreneur Norman Osborn. Norman is strict as a father and disappointed that Harry is yet to live up to his intellectual standards. In fact, he's more impressed with Peter, who shows an aptitude for science.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
On a field trip to a science lab, Parker suffers his usual bad luck, watching his best friend flirt with his lifelong crush. Then, a genetically engineered super spider escapes its shelter and bites Peter. At Oscorp, Norman vies for a military contract by showing off their new glider. But their human performance enhancers aren't ready yet. Rats showed an 800% increase in strength, but one test case showed unusual violence, aggression, and insanity. Regardless, Norman wants to push ahead with human trials, while Dr. Strong demanding to know who brings in the photos of Spider-Man. But the newspaper editor protects Parker's identity, saying the photos come in anonymously. Then Spider-Man comes to the rescue, and the Green Goblin knocks him out with noxious gas. When Peter wakes, the Goblin tells Spider-Man that, despite the hero he's been, the city will eventually turn against him. Instead, the Goblin offers an alliance. He tells Spider-Man to think about it, then flies off. The next issue of the Daily Bugle falsely claims that Spider-Man teamed up with the Goblin to terrorize Jameson, and with the paper's influence, citizens began turning against Spider-Man, just like Norman promised they would. Later, Peter checks in on MJ after a failed audition and offers a conciliatory cheeseburger, but she has nothing to care. Peter asks how things are going with him, but quickly stops himself. MJ's expression shows that things aren't going very well with Peter, and poorly asks why Peter is so interested. Then, before leaving, she says, he notices some thugs follow her, so he changes to Spider-Man and comes to the rescue. She thanks him, and while he hangs upside down, she holds up his mask just below his nose. Later, Aunt May hosts a Thanksgiving dinner with MJ and the Osborns. Before they say grace, Norman notices the wound on Peter's arm, giving away that he's Spider-Man. Norman excuses himself, and Harry goes after him, saying he was excited for him to meet MJ. Norman loudly tells his son that the girl is just after his money. Inside, Peter, Aunt May, and MJ hear the whole thing. MJ storms off, while Harry pitifully defends his father. Elsewhere, Norman's twisted alter ego demands he make Peter suffer by going after his loved ones. So the Green Goblin pays Aunt May a visit and terrorizes her. Peter finds her in the hospital and overhears her ramblings about those horrible yellow eyes. Later, MJ visits May and Peter at the hospital. She tells Peter that she's been ignoring Harry's phone calls. The fact is, she's in love with somebody else, Spider-Man. Peter tells her that he's Spider-Man's unofficial photographer, and Spider-Man actually asked him what he thought of him. Peter tells her what he said about the whirlwind of emotions he feels staring into Mary Jane's eyes, and she's touched by his words. Aunt May slyly listens, pretending to be asleep, while MJ takes Peter's hand, just as he walks in to witness their closeness. He returns home and tells his dad that he was right about MJ. She loves Peter, and Peter's been in love with MJ since before grade. Norman quietly takes note of this important person in Spider-Man's life as another potential victim, and comforts his son with a hug. At the hospital, Aunt May encourages Peter to tell MJ how much he cares about her. Everyone else knows, and it occurs to Peter that everyone else may include the Green Goblin, and MJ might be in danger. He runs to call MJ, but the Green Goblin answers and tells him where to find her. On top of the Queensboro Bridge, the Goblin rips a trolley car full of children to scratch, then gives Peter a choice: save them or save MJ. He chooses both, and rather than choose, Spider-Man catches MJ and the trolley. He holds them both, making it near impossible to fight off the Goblin's attacks. But Spider-Man isn't alone. Citizens on the bridge throw trash and other objects at the Goblin, which gives Peter a chance to safely lower MJ and the trolley into a large road. The Goblin chases Peter to an abandoned building, where they have their final showdown. Peter nearly defeats him until the villain unmasks to reveal his identity. Seeing his father, Peter hesitates, until the Goblin calls for his glider. Peter dodges the attack, and the machine strikes Norman instead, impaling him against the wall. Peter, he says, "Don't tell Harry." Then he dies. Spider-Man returns the dead man's body to And at Norman's funeral, he vows revenge on Spider-Man for killing his father. Looking at So, when MJ confesses her love for him and kisses him, Peter walks away. And to the heartbroken MJ, the kiss feels familiar. 2 years later, Peter struggles to balance his life as Peter Parker with his responsibilities as Spider-Man. He loses his job as a pizza delivery man and makes only meager funds when he turns infectious Spider-Man, which J. Jonah Jameson just uses as fodder for more slanderous stories in the Daily Bugle. At the university, Dr. Connors charges Peter for missing class of his 10 and for his stellar declining grades. He also reminds Peter that his paper on Dr. Otto Octavius' fusion project is overdue. Peter walks into a surprise party thrown by Tom May, along with Harry and MJ. It takes a second for him to remember that it's his birthday, and it takes just 1 more second for his friends to ask why he's so unavailable and distant. Peter asks about Osborn, and Harry shares that he's now the head of special projects. In fact, they're funding one of Peter's items, Otto. Harry offers to arrange a meeting. He also whispers to MJ and tells Peter that she's clearly still hungry. The subject changes to Spider-Man and Peter's photography album. Seething with hatred, Harry asks Peter if he knew who Spider-Man was. Would he tell him? When Pete doesn't answer, Harry walks away. Later, while his exhausted aunt sleeps, Peter spots a foreclosure notice. When she wakes, she offers him $20 for his birthday, and when he refuses, she responds. Outside, Peter runs into MJ, and she tells him how she liked seeing him tonight. She waits for him to make a move, but is, as always, disappointed. She tells him that she's seeing someone now, and senses Peter's jealousy. He breaks the awkwardness by telling her that he'll finally play tomorrow night. She says, back home, Mr. Dilkovich gives Peter a hard time for his late rent. Then he returns to his humble apartment. The next day, Harry introduces Peter to Otto Octavius, who heard from Connors that Peter is brilliant. Otto tells Peter about his fusion project, which will bring the world nearly limitless and clean energy. Peter is concerned about the stability of the reaction, but Otto assures him he's aware of the risks and effectiveness. Throughout the conversation, Otto is impressed with Peter's scientific acumen. On the night of MJ's play, Peter dresses up, picks up some flowers, and disappoints his friend when Peter calls. As Spider-Man, he saves some innocent lives and stops some criminals. But as Peter Parker, has the usher will not allow him in since the play is in progress. Afterward, Peter watches from a distance as Peter kisses the mansion city. Though she gets one more glance to see if Peter is around, but she just misses him. When Peter swings to his he suddenly finds that his website. The next day, Peter calls MJ and leaves an apologetic message, but it does little to assuage her frustration. Peter wishes he could tell her the truth about Spider-Man, so she'd know why he's always late and doesn't show up. But he knows that would be better. Later, Peter and Harry attend Otto's fusion energy demonstration. Working with advanced materials, Otto's developed 4 metallic arms. He fused into his cerebellum and control them like his own appendages. They also have an artificial intelligence of their own, but in the beginning, he shows Otto and they do not control him. The fusion reaction depends on a precious material called tritium. There's almost 25 pounds of it. Otto inserts the material action. But the reaction grows unstable and dangerous, attracting venom around the room. Peter disappears, while Harry orders Otto to shut it down, but Otto assures he'll stabilize. When flying debris nearly kills Harry, Spider-Man saves him. Spider-Man tries to shut down the room, but Otto stops him. Then shattered glass kills Otto's wife. Finally shuts down the reaction. At a lab, doctors attempt to remove the metal arms from Otto's body. His arms come to life and slaughter the doctors. Then Otto wakes and sees the damage caused by the machines. steal the money he'll need to do it. So he visits a local bank and rips the doors off the safe. The same bank where Peter and his aunt are inquiring about a loan. Peter runs off to become Spider-Man. He fights the mad scientist, but once again, his webs fail him. And Doc Ock rescues his aunt, but Otto gets away with money. That night, Peter attends an event as the Daily Beagle's photographer, where J. Jonah Jameson's son, an astronaut, is being honored. And the astronaut is attended by his girlfriend, Mary Jane Watson. Peter watches, heartbroken. He finds her later and tries to apologize again for missing the play, but she is unimpressed, and tells him then a drunk Harry approaches Peter and chastises him for his loyalty to Spider-Man, the man who killed his father. Finally, Peter is crushed by an announcement from Captain John Jameson.
The beautiful Miss Mary Jane Watson, Sister of America.
That night, his powers fail him again, and he crashes into dark alley, as he reads the Bugle's latest headline, Spidey and Doc rob bank. As Doc Ock uses his funny reading in his lab, Peter has a vision of Uncle Ben and tells him, Spider-Man. He throws his costume in the trash and walks away. In the next few days, he is the bold, powerful Peter Parker, the one who has bad luck, doesn't fight crimes, and gets good grades, and the one who attends Mary Jane's plays. He tells her that he's changed. He can now be there for her. She says it's too late. She's engaged to John, and that is not going to change. One day, Peter and his Aunt May visit Uncle Ben's grave. She blames herself for his death. She was the one that suggested Ben pick Peter up. But Peter finally confesses that he is the one responsible. He tells her about a thief he had a chance to stop, but didn't. A thief who went on to kill his uncle. Peter grabs her hand, but she pulls her away and beats her. Doc Ock visits Harry and demands more treatment for a local fusion experiment. When threatened, Harry agrees on the condition that Ock will bring new Spider-Man alive. Harry adds that Spider-Man can be found through Peter Parker. The kid takes pictures of him. Elsewhere, Peter comes across a burning building and finally decides to be a hero again, with or without the costume. He runs in and rescues a child, though he later learns there was never did that. Later, the landlord's daughter offers Peter some chocolate cake and watches with the unmistakable look of a girl crush. Then, at Aunt May's house, he finds her packing up to move into a small apartment, one she can afford. Peter tries to apologize for his last visit, but she stops him. She says it's water under the door, and it was brilliant of Peter to tell her the truth about Uncle Ben. Then she says, I love you, and hugs him. She also tells me Peter focuses and tries to use his powers again, but he falls again. Later, M asks Peter to meet her at a cafe. It seems Peter has got her mind and is ready to give things another shot. But Peter tells her that he was wrong before. He thought he could be there for her, but he can't. He leaves off the Frustrated, she asks, do you love me? And he responds, she doesn't believe him and asks him to kiss her. But as they lean forward, the spider sense activates. A car crashes.
Okay, YT, we are back.
Upset.
And this time,
Peter pitifully defends himself and she storms off. He fishes the ring out of the champagne. Later, Peter and his aunt are called into police headquarters, where they're informed that they were wrong about who killed Uncle Ben. Dennis Carradine was just an eyewitness, but Flint Marko was the true killer. He confessed the crime to his cellmate before escaping prison. MJ hears about it and visits Peter to see if he's okay, but he gruffly tells her that he's fine, and she leaves. Then, after hours of listening to the police radio for a sign of his uncle's killer, Peter passes out. While he's asleep, the black cube from the meteorite finds him and engulfs his body. When he wakes up, he's hanging off a building in a black Spider-Man outfit, feeling powerful. He brings a sample of the goo to his professor, Dr. Mars. He He observes that it has the characteristics of a symbiote, which needs to bond to a host to survive. And once it bonds, it may be hard to unbond. Back home,
1 sec, guys.
finds
你可以维持我吧。
water turns Marco into mud and washes him into the drainage system. Returning home, Peter snaps at his landlord and realizes the symbiote may be affecting his personality.
Get your rent when you fix this damn car.
So he removes the black suit before visiting Aunt May. He proudly tells her that Spider-Man killed Flynn Marco last night. But he's surprised when she is only shocked and not happy to hear it, adding,
Uncle Ben lent the room to us. 1 second.
Peter apologizes to the landlord for what he'll say to MJ when he calls her. Meanwhile, she visits Harry, where they do this, and this. After the kiss, MJ apologizes and leaves. Then Harry suddenly remembers everything, including his vow for revenge against Spider-Man. His father speaks to him again and tells him to make Peter suffer, attack his heart. So, Harry pays MJ a visit and tells her that if she wants Peter to live, she'll have to do something for him.
You're gonna do something for me.
And she does. She asks Peter to meet her and tells him that she doesn't want to see him anymore. The dumbfounded Peter says they can work it out and shows her the ring. But she is steadfast and lies to him.
I fall in love with you.
Then leaves. Watching from a distance, Harry congratulates him on his performance. Then Harry meets with Peter and pretends to still have amnesia and everything's fine between them. In their conversation, Peter learns for the first time that MJ was fired from the Broadway show. He's shocked.
She was fired. She told you. She didn't tell me.
And Harry lies, saying he's the other guy that MJ is in love with. Peter leaves, and a waitress asks Harry how the pie is. He responds, stewing in his apartment, Peter decides to wear the symbiote, then pays Harry a visit. In the ensuing fight, Peter eventually gets the upper hand and tells Harry he's only trying to convince him that he didn't kill his father. He took him from me. He loved me. Harry says. No, Peter replies. He despised you. Harry throws a punching bomb, but Peter quickly grabs it and throws it back. Harry is engulfed in the explosion as Peter walks off. Later, Peter finds Spider-Man's reputation in tatters, and the Daily Bugle publishes photos of him. Photos reported by Eddie Brock. At the Bugle, Peter approaches Eddie, celebrating his new staff job, and shows him proof of the picture of fake. Eddie says, keep it to himself.
If you do this, I will lose everything. There's not a paper in there. You should have thought better.
But Peter hands him the proof, and Eddie is fired. They follow, the city continues to affect Peter, driving him to more aggressive and impulsive behavior. Jazz bar, where MJ now works as a singer. Peter joins Mary Jane on stage and dances at her, then dances seductively with Gwen. Though when Gwen realizes it was all to make MJ jealous, she leaves. When a bouncer tries to make Peter leave, he fights back, and when MJ gets involved, he strikes her. At the sight of her in pain caused by him, Peter snaps out of it and sees what he's become, and he realizes that this is on by a Peter heads to the hotel tower, but finds it stuck to him until he strikes the bell, and it seems to adversely affect the suit. Downstairs, the humbled and humiliated Eddie Brock prays for revenge against Peter. The ringing bell draws his attention, and he follows it to see Parker struggling with the black goo. With the help of the ringing bell, his next host, Eddie Brock. Then, with his new powers and performing mind, Brock finds Flynn Marco, now recovered from Spider-Man's water attack. The two agree to team up and take on Spider-Man together. Brock kidnaps Mary Jane and holds her hostage in a taxi, suspended 80 stories above the ground in a giant web. When the police try to help, the Sandman stops them. Seeing the news, Peter grabs his old red and blue costume and visits an old friend. He asks the now scarred Harry Osborn for help, but he refuses, so Peter goes alone. But then, Harry's butler tells him that he cleaned his father's wounds the night he died. The blade that pierced his body did come from his glider, by his own hand. Spider-Man arrives to free MJ, but is overpowered by the combined attacks of Sandman and Brock. And when all hope is nearly lost, Harry Osborn arrives to help, and the two friends finally unite. Harry is able to take down the Sandman, but Peter loses the upper hand against Brock, until pipes fall, and the sound affects the black goo. Peter remembers the bell had a similar effect, and finally realizes how to remove the suit from Brock. But before he can act, Brock gets a hold of the glider and dives at Peter with its blades drawn. At the last moment, Harry aims at his path. Blades stab through him, and saves Peter's life. Brock tosses Osborn away with Ragnar. Then Peter uses the pipe to make more sound, and removes Brock. As the black goo grows dangerously, Peter throws one of Harry's bombs at him, and desperately wanting to hold on to his power, Brock jumps after him. When the explosion fades, Peter and his suit are gone. Flint Marko approaches Peter and tells him how he didn't want any of this. His daughter is dying, and he needed the money. Killing his uncle was an accident, a slip of the trigger finger when his partner ran over him. Peter forgives him, and Marko blows away. Thanks to Harry, he's being cradled in MJ's arms. Peter and Harry call each other friend. Then Harry dies, killed by the blades of his glider, just like his father. Sometime after the funeral, Peter visits MJ at the jazz club. They embrace and they share a dance. In another world, a young Peter Parker finds his father's study ransacked. When his father, Richard, sees the mess, he quickly springs to action, erasing notes and hiding research involving spiders. Peter is taken to his Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house. Then his parents say goodbye and leave him. Years later, Peter attends high school. He enjoys skateboarding and taking pictures with his paper. He also likes standing up for kids getting bullied, even if it means taking a few punches himself. When he stands up to Flash Thompson, Gwen Stacy takes notice and tells him it was stupid. Back home that night, in the basement, Peter finds an old briefcase that belonged to his father. Inside it, Peter finds a photo of his father, Dr. Kurt Connors. Both are very scientists. Searching for Kurt Connors online, Peter comes across an article about the plane crash that killed his parents, and finds articles about Connors' research into cross-species genetics, something Connors believes could lead to a world of equality without humans. The next day, the place where Connors' research he gets in by posing as an intern, and is surprised to find Gwen Stacy there. As the head intern, she gives a tour while Peter tries to avoid notice. Then they meet Dr. Kurt Connors. He tells them about his hopes to regrow his missing arm and asks the students how it can be done. Peter gives the correct answer: cross-species genetics and using various species' regenerative abilities. When Connors leaves, Gwen accuses Peter of following her, but he claims to just be there because he loves science. Then he sneaks away from the tour group. He finds a room with a symbol on it, which he recognizes as his father's notes. He breaks into the room and finds strange experiments being performed.
Until at least kill him once.
Elsewhere, Dr. Rotha finds to speed up his research. Norman Osborn is dying and needs the regenerative abilities that Connors is after. Connors explains that he just needs to figure out how to get past the table. Something mentioned in Richard Parker's notes. Peter returns to the tour group along with one of the spiders unnoticed on his neck. On the subway ride home, Peter finds that he's suddenly strong, fast, and has the ability to stick to walls. The next day, he pays Connors a visit. The scientist almost places a gun on him until Peter mentions he's the son of Richard Parker. Connors doesn't know why he is, but without taking his research, their hopes for achieving cross-species genetics have become far slimmer, especially considering the decay rate algorithm. But Peter takes out a case and shows a formula he grabs from his father's notes. Connors is amazed and invites Peter to join him in the lab. At school, Peter uses his new strength and reflexes to humiliate Father Thompson. Then gets a talking to from Uncle Ben. Thanks to Peter's misbehavior, Ben had to change shifts at work. So Peter will have to be the one to pick up on melees. Then Peter awkwardly asks out Gwen Stacy, but she says yes. Jonas shows Peter the Ganali device, a machine that can disperse antigens over an entire city, to cure a disease, for example. Then they run a simulation to see if the DNA can be used to regrow a mouse's missing limb. Peter's help is a success. So they inject a three-legged mouse with the real thing. Back home, Uncle Ben reminds Peter that he forgot to pick up his aunt and orders him to apologize. Then he chastises him further, telling him the principle that his father lived by. If you could do something good for other people, you have a moral obligation to do it. Not choice, he says. Responsibility. And Peter responds, he didn't think it was his responsibility to make himself. Then Peter storms out of the house, inadvertently shattering the glass on the front door. It's out to look for him, while Peter stops at a convenience store for chocolate milk. But he's 2 cents short. Then a thief robs the cash register and tosses Peter the milk. The store employee shouts for someone to stop the thief, but Peter refuses. Then the criminal Peter let go bumps into Uncle Ben and inadvertently shoots him. Peter runs over and watches his uncle die. In the following days, Peter grieves by walking the streets, beating criminals, and searching for his uncle's killer. When one of his victims promises revenge and says that he'll remember Peter's face, he has the idea to wear a mask. So the next time he chases criminals, Peter wears a red skin. He also looks into Oscorp's research on biocables and uses it to create web shooters, allowing him to swing through the city. Soon, the city becomes aware of the web-slinging vigilante, and so does Gwen Stacy's father. He's captured George Stacy, and Peter continues to upgrade his costume until he finally becomes Spider-Man. He easily captures petty criminals and learns to evade the police, who don't seem to appreciate his unsolicited help. At Oscorp, Dr. Rotha sees the mouse's regrown limb and pushes for Connors to begin human trials. Norman Osborn will die without the gene therapy, but Connors refuses, as they need to run more tests first. So Rotha fires him. Connors realizes that will mean losing the chance to use the drug himself and regrow his missing arm. So, before vacating the lab, he takes the injection. He moves up with a new arm, but begins to suffer side effects. Scales spread on his body as he begins to transform into a man-sized lizard. Meanwhile, Gwen invites Peter to dinner at her house. That night, he meets her father and listens to his diatribe against the new Spider Vigilante. The supposed hero recently apprehended a car thief, who the police were following in the hopes that he'd lead them to the people who run the whole operation. Thanks to Spider-Man, their 6-month-long sting was a waste. Peter defends the hero, while George is adamant he should leave the job for the police. Outside, Peter confesses to Gwen that he is the web-slinging vigilante, and they kiss. Gwen is called inside, and sirens call Peter's attention. Following the chaos, he finds a humanoid lizard on the Williamsburg Bridge, searching for Dr. Rotha. The lizard throws Dr. Rotha's car off the bridge, but Peter catches it just in time. The villain takes off, and rather than pursue him, Peter stays behind to help civilians, rescuing a child from a burning vehicle. The next day, arrest warrant for the one man they can positively place at the prior night's crime scene, Spider-Man. At the lab, Peter finds Dr. Connors acting strangely, and seeing the lab has turned into a part lizard animal. He tries telling Captain Stacy that Connors turned himself into a giant lizard, but he's met with skepticism. Later, Peter sees an ad in the Daily Bugle offering money for pictures of the lizard. Then, Peter spots lizards conspicuously crawling into a storm drain. So, he heads underground to investigate and finds the lizard, plus snaps a few photos of it. The lizard tells Spider-Man that he can feel himself growing stronger every day, and slashes Spider-Man across the chest. They fight through the sewers until Peter escapes, though he leaves his camera behind. On it, the lizard spots the property of Peter Parker's sticker. Peter heads to Gwen's place and she tends to his wounds. And when they kiss, she hesitates. She already worries about her father every time he leaves the house to fight crime. She doesn't know if she can take worrying about Peter the same way, but he insists that he has to stop the lizard. After all, he's the one who handed over the formula that made his transformation possible. He takes Gwen for a swing on his way. While underground, Connor returns to human form, but begins to go mad. He injects himself again, and vows that Parker will not get in the way of his plans. He heads to Peter's school, and the two fight in the halls and classrooms. Peter changes to a Spider-Man outfit, while the Lizard rants about how he can cure everyone, the same way he cured himself. When the police arrive, the Lizard escapes back the way he came, through the pipes, and Peter goes after him in the sewers. Peter speaks to Gwen on the phone and tells her to head back to Oscorp to generate a serum. Then he finds Connor's underground lab and watches a recording of the madman. Connors lays out his plan to disperse the gene-altering substance across the city to convert the citizens into lizard people, more powerful than weak humans. And he plans to spread the substance from Oscorp Tower using the Ganali device. When the police attack the lizard, their squad becomes the first subjects of the citywide experiment. Peter calls Gwen and tells her to get out of Oscorp. The lizard is on his way. She tells him the antidote just needs 8 more minutes, and she'll stay to help everyone get out. He tries to stop her, but it's no use. As Spider-Man swings toward Oscorp, the police manage to corner him, and George Stacy learns his identity. It's headed to Oscorp, Peter warns, and your daughter's there right now. George lets him go, but an overzealous officer shoots Peter in the leg. Despite the wound, Peter continues to Oscorp. With 1 minute to go for the antidote, Lizard breaks into the lab. Across the city, a wounded Spider-Man struggles to make it to town. The father of the boy who saved on the bridge sees his struggle on the news. Working in construction, he calls his friends and has cranes lined up in a series toward Oscorp, giving Spider-Man an easy, swingable path. On the ground, Gwen gets out of the building with the antidote and runs into her father. She tells him that she needs to get the serum to Spider-Man, but unwilling to let his daughter take that risk, George grabs the antidote and heads in himself. Atop the building, Peter tries to stop the lizard from activating the Ganali device. In their fight, Connors overpowers Peter and destroys his web shooters. But George Stacy rescues him at the last moment. He hands Peter the antidote, while he takes care of Lizard, with help from his shotgun and some liquid nitrogen. But soon, the lizard regenerates too quickly and mortally wounds Captain George Stacy, then goes after Spider-Man. But not before Peter manages to swap the lizard serum for the antidote. The device activates and releases a cloud of the antidote, turning Connors and his other victims human again. Peter nearly tumbles off the building, but Connors catches him, and Peter runs to George. With his dying breaths, Stacy admits he was wrong. The city does need Spider-Man, but he just wants Peter to make one promise. Spider-Man is going to make enemies. It's going to be dangerous for anyone to be close to him. So he tells Peter to stay away from Gwen. Peter agrees, and George dies. Dr. Connors is arrested, and in the days that follow, Peter stays away from Gwen, even at her father's funeral. Then, one rainy day, she demands to know where he's been, and Peter tells her that he can't see her. But she realizes that must be because her father made him promise he'd stay away, to keep her safe. She leaves. But Peter misses her. When he's late to class one day, he promises he won't be tardy again. The teacher tells him not to make promises he can't keep, and Peter whispers to Gwen, they uploaded the files, but they find an assassin has infiltrated their flight, and in the ensuing struggle, the plane crashes. 2 years after Captain Stacy's death, Spider-Man pursues Alexei Sitsevich, currently attempting to steal a truck full of plutonium. In the chaos, hapless electrical engineer Max Dillon is nearly struck by an airplane taxi, but Spider-Man saves his life. Max is enthralled by the hero. As Spider-Man safely procures the plutonium, Gwen calls him from the high school graduation he's currently missing. As they talk, Peter is haunted by the vision of her father, to whom he promised he'd stay away from Gwen. Peter takes down the bad guy, while Gwen gives her graduation speech, a about how short life is and how you have to fight for what matters most to you. Peter rushes over and makes him just as his name is called. And before leaving the stage, he passionately kisses Gwen. After the graduation, Peter can't stop himself thinking about her father and their promise. And at dinner, he can't bring himself to join Gwen and her family. She can tell she assures him that it's her choice to be with him and take the risk. It's not her father's decision. But Peter can't live with himself knowing he might bring her home. So, in the days that follow, Spider-Man continues to help those in need. And Max Dillon's obsession with the hero grows, regularly speaking to a photo of Spider-Man, calling him best friend. On his way to Oscorp, he bumps into Gwen. On the elevator ride, he enviously watches a news report about Spider-Man and finds the similar adoration from the public. And he tells Gwen about the time he was saved. At the end of their ride, he's shocked the girl remembered his name. At the Osborn home, Harry speaks to his ill father, Norman. The man accuses his son of throwing away his intelligence and potential, then reminds him that the disease is hereditary and asks him to see Harry's early signs of retroviral hypoplasia, which will eventually kill him too. He hands Harry a small device containing his life's work, everything that's kept him alive. And as the next day, Peter sees a news report announcing Norman Osborn's death, and that his son Harry will inherit the Osborn empire. At Osborn, employees leave for the day, but Max is forced to stay late and look into a current flow problem in the genomics lab, on Max's birthday of all days. In the lab, as Max works on the issue, something goes wrong. He is electrocuted and falls into a vat of heat. After Harry's first board meeting as the new head of Oscorp, he's visited by a friend he has not seen in 8 years, Peter Parker. The reunion is awkward at first, but they're soon laughing again.
You got your braces on. There's nothing distracting you. There it is.
Then they catch up on things by the East River, about the supermodels Harry hung out with in France, and Peter's current love life.
I don't know. It's complicated.
Elsewhere, the seemingly dead Max Dillon springs to life, though he now appears to be a being made of electricity. As he walks the streets, he inadvertently emits an electric signal, setting off car alarms, and when he places his hand on a headlight, he absorbs its energy. Later, Gwen calls Peter and asks him to meet, figuring it's time they try to be friends. But it's hard for them to forget how much they like each other. They nearly kiss, but Gwen stops it with the admission that she's moving to England. She's up for a scholarship at Oxford, and she's probably going to get it. Before they can discuss further, they notice a strange disturbance at Times Square. So Peter changes to Spider-Man and leaves. At Times Square, Max is drawn to underground power cables. He grabs them and absorbs their power. Then, as a truck nearly strikes him, he uses that power to easily lift it and toss it aside. Police surround him, and Max panics and damage. Suddenly, he lets out an electric blast that sends the police and their vehicles flying. Spider-Man catches one just before it crushes an officer. The rest of the cops fire at Max, but the bullets just pass through. Spider-Man tries talking to him, and the police hold their fire. After Max reminds him, Peter remembers the man and remembers saving him. Max tells Peter he's not sure what's going on, but he can feel power and anger. Peter tries to keep him talking and suggests they go somewhere else, away from people. But when Max accidentally releases more electricity, a cop fires, and he strikes back. A cop is nearly killed by debris, but Peter saves him, and the crowd applauds, while they only mock Max. Betrayed by Spider-Man, he sends an electric shock at him, and the two fight. While Spider-Man is incapacitated, Max absorbs more electricity, shutting down Times Square and filling himself with more power. Floating above him, he captures bystanders until Spider-Man takes him out with a stream of water and fire hose.
I'm done, dude.
Later,